Candace Mcadams is a graduate of New York University and an International Coaching Federation certified coach and extensive training in evidence-based practice in cognitive behavioral coaching. She is a mental health coach with the famous Lyra Health, a leading mental health care benefits company. And I want to join her as a keynote speaker. Her presentation entitled The Importance of Mental Health Support in a Climate of Extreme Ambiguity. And boy, are we in one now. Candace, thank you.
I concur, William. Thank you all for your patience. And yes, ambiguity. What a beautiful topic for these times. Thank you for improvising with me. I'm glad to be back. And once again, I just want to reiterate how honored I am to be here. And I thank you for letting me be your guide through this experience as we sort of foray into the world of mental health in the healthcare system. I know your time is very valuable, so I'm going to move forward and just kind of jump in and say that I really, really admire what you do, and I have a very, very special place in my heart for all that it is you are, because we share a commonality and that we are really concerned about the welfare and making sure that others are okay. That is our commonality. I'm also really, really, really interested in the mental health of healthcare workers because I myself was a patient who was diagnosed with aplastic anemia right after I graduated at NYU at an early age. And I was able to see some of the flaws in the healthcare system. I saw a lot of people that were burnout, tired, exhausted, had sort of lacked that feeling of apathy and compassion, which is actually what brought them to this profession. So I really, really want to make sure that everyone is okay out there. And that is what we're going to use this talk to really focus on today. And hopefully give you some tools that will make you feel better by the end. So as I jump in, I want to go ahead, hold on just one second. Just want to kind of reintroduce myself. I don't know what part you heard before, but that is me by the beach. That is my happy place. As you can see, I'm not in any professional gear. I'm in a jean and a t-shirt, but that is part of my profession. Every day after I have a long, exhausting day of working with clients and holding the space for others, I make sure that I go and rest by the beach, restore, renew, so that I can come back to my next day full of that self-compassion that I give to others. So what is my goal here today? Really what I want to do is go ahead and spread the awareness about the current mental health challenges in healthcare and put a spotlight on compassion fatigue. I want to empower you to take responsibility for all the wonderful qualities you have and encourage you to thrive in your natural gift of compassion. I want to inspire you to create a practice of radical self-care and self-compassion so doing your job becomes easier with time. So, what is compassion? When we define it, compassion embodies a tangible expression of concern for those who are suffering. I put a picture of a little boy there because that is just something we're born with. We have that natural gift. And then there are those like yourself who live a life that is dedicated to serving others. This is a definition here that we have. Those who live a life in love and dedication to the service for the well-being of our human family. Before, I was asking you to take 1 second to just acknowledge that that's what you've chosen to do with your life as a healthcare worker, to live a life in love and dedication to the service of the well-being of our human family. It's pretty amazing stuff. And I'm not sure when the last time it was that you were able to acknowledge yourself, but I think you should be doing it pretty regularly. So what's an unhealthy use of compassion? Well, you understand that it's impossible to give what you don't have. As part of your work, you make sure to put your own oxygen mask on first by practicing the routine of self-care. You regularly monitor your mental health, especially after any traumatic events. And you're able, as a result, to show up in all that you are, shift after shift, able to act critically and be there for others. What's an unhealthy use of compassion? Well, it's putting your needs on the back burner. It's pushing through exhaustion and mental fatigue in order to be there for another, and not asking for help when you're struggling. The results of this, we're starting to find, is that it affects your ability to provide safe, high quality care, and most likely leads to bigger problems down the line, which we'll talk about in a minute. 86.9% of emergency response personnel reported symptoms after exposure to highly distressing events with traumatized people. 86%. As Dr. Naomi Rachel Remen says, the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be affected is as unrealistic as expecting to walk through water and not get wet. Let's talk about the cost of compassion during COVID. These are the mental health statistics for healthcare workers in 2020. I want you to just sort of take a scan and notice some of the things people were experiencing: frustration, exhaustion, anxiety, trouble sleeping. You may find yourself in here, and if you have, you'll realize by these numbers you are not alone. In 2020, 39% of healthcare workers did not feel they were getting the emotional support they needed. Why is that? This is where I got very curious about your industry. And I started to learn that there's some stigmas behind getting mental health. Many in the profession view asking for help as a weakness. Many healthcare workers hold themselves to high standards. There's a highly competitive nature, and they feel seeking mental health care is a weakness, and people are not openly talking about the struggles they face. There's also an impractical standards of being the picture of health. Healthcare workers commonly enter the healthcare industry with a calling to care for others and might feel unqualified to effectively care for others if they need treatment for themselves. Healthcare workers are expected to be the picture of health, so they often have a hard time admitting that something may be wrong with them. I like to use an analogy with this in the way that we need to kind of start to shift the paradigm. If you were driving an Aston Martin, you would not want to have to take that to a mechanic who is driving a broke down car. So we have to make self-care a priority. Pushing through is not the solution, and we need to kind of turn that paradigm around so it works better for all of us. There's also a fear of judgment and discrimination. Oftentimes healthcare workers fear discrimination in licensures, or that seeking care will damage their professional reputation, or that peers or colleagues might see them differently. Most likely those peers or colleagues are going through the same things that you are. That's why conversations are really important. And over time, what ends up happening to people is this psychological duress of not being able to sit with emotions, feel emotions, allow for emotions, or not being able to manage the thoughts, not being able to take care of yourself, starts to really change the cognitive perspective of the caregiver. And such things as intimacy, trust, safety, self-esteem, and control. And often we interchange that with the word compassion fatigue. So what is compassion fatigue? Compassion fatigue was a term coined by Dr. Charles Figley that highlights the physical and mental exhaustion and emotional withdrawal experienced by those who care for sick or traumatized people. It often involves an intense state of tension or excessive preoccupation with cognitive, physical, psychological, and emotional pain and suffering of trauma survivors. What it tends to develop is an apathy or indifference towards the suffering of others as a result of the overexposure to trauma. In other words, you're not really being yourself. So who does it affect? It can affect a lot of people in the emergency response, such as fire workers. We also have it in some of our police officers, as we've noticed, FBI, that sort of thing. It also it can affect psychologists, coaches like me, veterinarians, and it can even affect you. Here are some of the symptoms that we need to look out for, although there's many more that I'd love to share with you in a document later so that you can continually look out for them. But here's some of the main ones: being exhausted and feeling depleted. I want you to just kind of ask yourself if any of this has happened to you in your course of working in the field you have. Difficulty concentrating or sleeping, reduced ability to feel sympathy or empathy, that's a big one. Anger and irritability, dread of working with certain patients, a heightened sense of anxiety, and problems with intimacy or personal relationships, even trouble parenting. Here's some compassion fatigue breakdown. All three are actually under the title of compassion fatigue. But compassion fatigue can be both cumulative and can happen fast. And if it's identified, it can be managed early and has a faster recovery than, let's say, burnout. The distinction in burnout is it's a cumulative process. It happens slowly over time. And it's marked by just an exhaustion and withdrawal that's mainly has to do with increased workload and institutional stress. It's not trauma related. To go back to trauma related, there's also secondary trauma. So it's the emotional and psychological effects experienced through indirect exposure to the details of the traumatic experiences of others. So you could be in a room and hear a sobbing parent when they've lost their child and still be affected. So it's important to note that if you're surrounded in that sort of environment, you can also just hear a story from somebody of a really kind of traumatic event and really be affected. That happens a lot in my profession. How to prevent compassion fatigue. So this is where I come in with my coaching and expertise, because I've made self-care a huge priority in my daily life. One of the first things is just very simple, but taking good care of your body. Obviously in healthcare, we promote that. So it's eating healthy, exercising, treating yourself, not grabbing that extra cup of coffee, but water is one of the best caffeines actually we can have. Exercising, really taking yourself out and getting yourself a nice massage after a really long shift, just restoring your body. The second I really want to kind of highlight is emotions. Emotions, I call them emotions because they need some way to be expressed. They need, in other words, they need an outlet. I would just imagine that most of you have a very good friend, and if that good friend was to come knocking at your door today and said, "I'm not okay," you most likely wouldn't shut the door in their face and turn them away. It's the same with your emotions. They are usually trying to tell you something and get through to you. So I would say treat your emotions as you would a best friend. Journal, meditate, spend time in nature. Get to begin to ask yourself, like, how am I feeling? Check in on the regular. And if that's not accessible to you or not something you're accustomed to doing, talk to a therapist or a coach. We'll help you be able to get in there and really start to access emotions if there's something you're used to kind of shutting off or shutting down. Also, practicing self-care and healthy boundaries. So really learning to say no to something, to say yes to yourself. If you're just not feeling good, it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to take some time for yourself. And I think that is one of the main things that needs to start to shift in the healthcare industry, because it's not happening enough from what at least my research and what talking to others. I'd also recommend leaning into your support system. So just really talking to colleagues. I can't stress how important it is that you all start a conversation. My other job is in film, and I will never forget the day that we had the Me Too movement start. And it was a wonderful time for me because we felt it was such a toxic environment, the film industry, and just to have so many people start to talk about their experiences was extremely healing. I don't know if you know about the doctor that committed suicide in New York, but that sort of started a Twitter conversation and a social media conversation. And a lot of people started to talk about the problems in mental health care, and that's how this stuff gets started. So talk openly and encourage and foster an environment where that's okay to do. Get a compassion tribe of people who understand. So colleagues, friends, people that are around you that understand. It's okay to also have your group of people that don't understand, but they're just really nurturing and kind of ground you and pull you away and pull you out of your work. But main thing is get support. So compassion that does not include yourself is incomplete, says Buddha. And he was around a long time ago, and it still holds true today. The other thing that I want to note is in the beginning slide, I had a picture of Mother Teresa. She's really, really amazing. But she also, as I had said before, she really, really stressed the need for self-care and self-compassion. I think we need to listen to them. So also, how do you help others? If you notice somebody else is struggling, something's not right, a colleague is just, they seem burnout, they seem tired, that same light that you normally see in their eyes, it's not okay. Check in, encourage an atmosphere in your workplace where it's okay not to be okay, like I said. Talk openly about your experience in your workplace and start building more programs. And talk to your managers, your bosses, the hospitals. There are programs out there. I have a friend who is in the ICU in New York City at Mount Sinai, and she said there's plenty of programs, but people are not doing them. So encourage your friends and your colleagues to get involved as much as possible and continue to seek more mental health information and encourage others to take a quality of life test. I am going to be sending out a actual link to a wonderful site that will link you up. This is the quality of life test is a great way to monitor if maybe compassion fatigue is setting in or burnout is on its way. And I want to kind of start to bring this home that really happy you is a happy life. And when I say that, what I'm really stressing is we are meant to feel good. I learned this very well going through and overcoming a very serious disease. During that time, I was able to really start to face the idea of mortality. And I was able to, as I laid there in my bed and started to ask, like, why am I here? What do I want my legacy to do? If I survive another year, what do I want to be remembered for? I started to ask those powerful questions that we do in coaching long before I even knew what coaching was. And what slowly started to develop is I started to hear answers. I started to get to know myself from a deep level. And I started to connect with what makes me me. All the time when I'm in coaching, I really start to listen in to my clients. They come to me broken, scared, sad, depressed, full of anxiety. And slowly, as we start to work together, they start to reconnect with what's true about them. The truth is, we are joy, we are ease, we are resilient, we are resourceful, and we are able to get through anything. So when we're not feeling good, that's usually an indication that we actually need to come home to ourselves. Stress, for example, is an emotion that's just telling us there's another way to do this. We need to check in with the self. Once we do that, the rest of our life starts to reflect in a different way. So how do we do that? I have a couple of solutions from the coaching work that I've done. One is to really connect with the best version of yourself. I like to spend about 2.5 hours with my new clients on getting to know their core values. You don't have to get sick like I do and almost die to start to get to know the self. It's just really assessing, what is it that I am? What have I always known myself to be? And who do I think I always will be? This is really a wonderful compass in times that are very stormy, where we don't feel like ourselves. We're able to go back in and check in with those values and say, what's missing? What values am I stepping on? What do I need to get back to? And what do I need to tune up? There's also the practice of self-compassion. I call it the goldenest rule, but learn to treat yourself as you would treat others. I think this is very true for this industry. It's really going inward first so that you can be the best to others outside. I also say accept yourself for being a human. Know that someone else somewhere in the world is going through the exact same thing as you are. I have clients every day come to me, and as they rant and rave and talk and express and get all of these things out, they feel like they're the only one in the world going through that. And I will tell you, as a coach who sees about 40 clients a week, that is not the case. We are all human. We all struggle. We all go through the same things. I've also traveled a lot. I've been around the world in 64 countries. We are all so similar, and we all struggle the same. So just accept that you're human. If you're struggling, it's okay. Another thing that has really gotten people through COVID and is very, very important in life is to learn the things you can control and the things you can't. It's a good old serenity prayer if you haven't heard it before. It really does make a difference. Most of the things in your life are not in your control. If we were to worry about a pandemic coming, it didn't change the fact that the pandemic was going to come. It came. Worry doesn't really help in our process. It just creates burden. So it's better to, if you're really struggling, write a list of the things that are in your control and what you're not. And I always tell my clients, rip that paper in half, and the things you can't control, throw it in the garbage on a regular, and get focused on what you can. What you can control is your response to how out of control life is. How are you going to be with that? That's your responsibility. Your response is your responsibility, and will always be, by the way. Also, never underestimate your resilience. You are way more powerful than you realize. And really, when you look back at your life and all of the times that have been hard, you've always made it through. I think often, I'm from California, and there was a lot of houses that burned down, obviously in Malibu. And a lot of people described relief. Well, my family is okay. And what they described was the most relief that they felt is that they had worried for 20 years that this would happen every time they left their house and thought their oven was on every time, and they no longer had to worry. We always march on. We're always able to get through. It's the mind, it's the anxiety, it's the disconnection from that part of us that knows that to be true, that tells us otherwise. Don't buy the story. Get back to the moment where all is good. And this is how we really do it. We start to practice mindfulness on the regular. If we notice, like I said, to bring up that story of a burning house in front of you, in that moment, as families are hugging their loved ones, everything is okay, even with a burning house. So I really encourage you to really find as many moments as you can, live as many moments. If something's happening and you're struggling in an operating room, just take a moment, get back. Everything is okay. And really, we've talked a lot about gratitude out there, but gratitude is one of the quickest ways to get us back to the moment. If you guys were just to take 1 minute right now, I'm going to give you 1 minute. I want you to just take stock of 5 things you're grateful for about this moment. Just breathe into that. Feels different, right? Keep doing that. It's good for you. And I'll leave with the final words that, you know, passion drives people to be great and to continue moving forward through tough times. And caring is an amazing power, but it comes with responsibility, mostly to yourself. So thank you so much for allowing me to share with you here today. Like I said, it's been an honor. And please, let's just go ahead and open up for some Q&A and start a conversation.
Thank you, Candace. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We had a lot of people online listening and comments were starting to come through. Um, I have things that were just spinning out of my head, but I know you, so I get a phone call every once in a while, and I get the free therapy every so often. Thank goodness, or I don't think I'd still be here.
Oh, man.
Um, but we can
I
open
have
up.
a question for you, or I guess just something to discuss about the emotional support systems at hospitals or departments. Sometime administer or opportunities to have just a group session talk. Um, is everybody able to get to those, or do they just have them in their certain groups or departments to be able to kind of talk about anything? And in those sessions, you don't repeat anything that leaves everything stays in that room, so you can talk openly and stuff. I've been in a few of those following a disaster session or something like that might have happened. I think those are really, really helpful for everybody to kind of get back on track, and if you need some help from some other friends that you might not have known about.
I think those are terrific. I see online that, a lot of people either wished their institutions would implement programs like that, or as somebody mentioned, oftentimes these programs that do exist in hospitals, we're not able to attend because of the bit of busy clinical schedule. And we're like this small portion that hospital management kind of forgets, because we're in the OR, so we can't get to it. So some of the most stressful and time consuming jobs in the hospital, those people can't get to them. That was some comments that were made in our chat question and answer.
I've got a question. As far as in a corporate, with us having corporations all over the, hospitals all over the US, is there anything we can incorporate in our monthly or weekly sessions or meetings that, for just a brief part of our meetings that we could do with our employees as managers, just, maybe a 5-minute segment on each one of those meetings that we could bring up to the table at that point in time?
Yeah, I would love to speak on that, Ty. I think that if you were able to do a check-in, even if it's an acknowledgement session of just acknowledging some sort of thing. I've noticed I work a lot in tech, and they have created sort of a wellness challenge to some of their employees, which has been really super effective. These employees they work really long hours. They're having a really, really hard time giving themselves a timeout, but when it's mandatory, they do it. So it sort of becomes a real team building thing, but it's also a way to get your employees taking good care of themselves as well. So some sort of wellness challenge is a great way to do that. And it could be different exercises, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Do you find there's a gender difference? Maybe not on today's virtual talk because you don't have people in the audience, or you're not seeing the chat questions and answer. Is there a gender difference in people seeking help or acknowledging that they may have a problem and therefore seeking advice?
So no, actually no. I actually see a lot of the male population, and they're probably about equal in my world, like I said, of tech and some of the creatives I work with, which I think is fantastic. I often find a lot of women say, well, men are so unemotional, or they just are so stoic. And actually, that's not true. There's a lot going on. And I know this as a coach, because they come to a place where they feel safe being able to be emotional. And that's just something I wish would change. I wish men were able to have those vulnerabilities and feel safe enough out in the world to be able to talk about it and not be viewed as sort of weak. Because it's just simply not true. We're all human beings. We all feel things. We all have anxieties. We all have stressors. And yeah, I see that equally across the board. And I'm really happy that a lot of men are coming to me because I think it's been very healing for them to be able to have a place to bring that, because they just don't in the world a lot of times.
Are you seeing the problems different between men and women that you see?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think there's some role differences, right? The pressures they feel. I do see that men tend to take on a lot of pressure, hold it inside, and then that creates the generalized anxiety or the depression or the disconnection. They tend to bottle up more than women, I would say. And that's a really big problem over time, as we talked about today. You can't bottle this stuff up. So, yeah.
As a professional, how do you extract that then?
It's a good question. I think the coaching model extracts that, because we're really, as coaches, we are there to ask those powerful questions. And it's by asking those powerful questions that they start to listen within and kind of come up with their own answer. So it feels very safe. I love the spirit of curiosity in any conversations. We tend to communicate in sort of I or you or this or that. But curiosity, I'm just curious what's going on for you. People feel heard, they feel seen, and they immediately feel like they can trust you and open up. It's a really powerful tool to incorporate in your communication, and something I do all the time as a coach. So I think that's sort of the key, right? It's just asking questions, which is great for you and your colleagues. I notice some things up. You're normally this way. What's going on over there? I'm kind of curious about what your experience is, right? They don't feel as threatened. How many times have you heard, I hate confrontation. I hate talking about my feelings, So it's sort of a way to ease them into it. And there's a great guy that I love, Chris Voss. He's an FBI negotiator. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he uses a lot of the same techniques when he was working with terrorists that we do in coaching. And that was really just asking people about their own experience and repeating back to them what you're hearing. Acknowledging what you're hearing is a great way to get people to open up to you. Yeah, pretty interesting stuff.
I know you touched on the burnout factor, but I've seen that a lot in our profession. Do you have any examples of things that you could do as a member of a group that's experiencing burnout to support other people that you're working with, even as you're kind of going through the same situation? Or what thoughts do you have?
Yeah, so burnout is going to, again, look a lot like it's under the umbrella of compassion fatigue. So if that's happening, I don't know if this answers your question. One of the reasons I want to provide the quality of life assessment is so that people can first identify. Burnout takes a little bit more time, it seems like, in at least the research I've done, to really heal and process, and it's environmental. So it kind of starts with institutions. It starts with the environment. If the environment's extremely toxic, for example, it's a systemic thing. It has to start to get changed within. So I would say when you're asking for solutions, is that kind of where you're going?
Well, I think I was specifically asking, obviously people could probably seek help individually, but if you're all working together and you're all under that same type of pressure, is there anything specific you can do to support each other in light of the fact that you're all experiencing it as a group? Yeah,
I think it kind of goes back to Ty's original inquiry. And I think, challenge some of the things you were talking about with sort of like being able to talk amongst, as a group. That team, I think that team feeling of we're in this together and we're going to get through this together and we're going to come out of this together, I think is important. Mindfulness practices, encouraging such things as, I'm not sure in a hospital environment, but meditation has been extremely useful in prison systems and school systems and all different types, even with police officers, it's been very effective. So we're finding that a lot of times just encouraging an environment where we take a time out together and we're in kind of a spirit of taking good care of ourselves, but we're doing that and by supporting each other in that. So group things are important. Also just probably I know I have a lot of friends that are also in healthcare and nurses and that sort of thing, and they tend to go to a bar after a long couple shifts. I would try and think of healthy activities outside of that. Let's all, I don't know, I'm from California, let's all go for a hike, or let's all do something that is not quite, I've earned from a stressful week 3 glasses of wine, because I don't know if that's necessarily solving the problem. It's kind of avoiding it. So I would just say kind of shifting over to something that is team building, just like in any profession. Yeah.
I have a question. Like you mentioned mindfulness, like, can you explain mindfulness and what that means? I see that word like thrown around a lot. Like what is the concept of mindfulness?
Yeah. So it's sort of being able to watch your experiences and allow for them. You're sort of start to become an observer of what's happening. So that's kind of like, and mindfulness can happen doing anything. You could be cooking. You could be at the beach. You could be taking a bath. A lot of people, when they hear the word mindfulness, think that they have to sit and be quiet for 2 to 3 minutes, but it's really just kind of watching what your mind is doing, watching and observing your activities. It's watching and observing your emotions. And it's really just sitting and like allowing it to be what it is. And by allowing it to be what it is, you're able to sort of cultivate a feeling of presence. So for example, if we were kind of to get mindful about what we're doing now, we're on a Zoom call together and there's these squares that are happening and you guys have been up since really early. And so there's all these circumstances that we're just watching. We're not really judging it. And we're a little more on purpose. We're not on autopilot. We're starting to kind of pull ourselves out of the moment. out of the situation and the circumstance and back into just watching and observing, if that makes sense.
So that's like being in the moment, not thinking too far in the future, not thinking too far in the past, which I suck at. And I always have to remind myself to smell the roses. I guess that's a cliche. But it's so damn true. You gave us that 1 minute and I took it seriously, closed my eyes, and I thought about 5 things as you suggested that I should be thankful for. And I really felt relaxed after that 1 minute. It had nothing to do, with this meeting. It just had to do with, some family and, I'm making an income and whatever, just 5 things. And it really helped. I think my heart rate went down to 25, which I think is a good thing. I don't know.
That's why your Apple Watch reminds you to like breathe every day, right?
Yeah. Right. One thing though I want to bring up, and maybe you can respond to that, is a couple of people have brought up the importance of sleep, which we're often deprived of in this profession.
Yes. And so would you like me to speak on how important that is? Because I will say it is absolutely vital. That's one of our boundaries, by the way. We really have to, as we start to do work-life balance, we really have to learn to get sleep. I don't know about you, but when I don't sleep, I'm like Chicken Little. Do you guys remember Chicken Little? When he was like run around and be like, the sky is falling, everything becomes more dramatic, and it's not good. So yes, we all need sleep. It obviously compounds problems when we're not well and we're not getting sleep. And I think that probably happens quite a bit with you. I don't know, William, if you want to comment on that, but in your industry where you have to sort of be on call and get up in the middle of the night and perform under these extreme circumstances. So yeah, getting a regular routine if you possibly can. I know there's circumstances that you have to work with, but little things like not being on the phone, technology 30 minutes before bed, super big. That activity I told you about, acceptance before we go to sleep. A lot of times we can stress, like you said, William, we'll be back in the past of what's happened in the day, or we'll be thinking about the future. I call them the alternate planets. If you think about the past, it's already happened. If you think about tomorrow, you don't know what's going to happen, AKA COVID, right? So we don't want to live there too much. If we're living in those planets too much, we are not experiencing the moment. So at night, doing that acceptance exercise I talk about, of just like kind of putting a line down a piece of paper and saying, okay, what can I do and what can I not do? That is huge for people. A lot of people got through COVID doing that and just realizing there's a few little things they can do. And one is getting sleep. So whatever it is, it's really important that you set the tone and the environment for sleep at night, turning down lights, soft. I love to take a bath at night. It's kind of sending a signal to my body. It's okay to rest however you can get there. Anything else you want to ask about sleep? We have a lot to say at Lyra about sleep, but there's a lot there. So I don't know if you.
Well, you know, we carry the anxiety in our jobs, in our environment, in our culture. And sometimes it's that anxiety that keeps us from sleeping. And I know you're pretty much a nature path, natural woman and all that, but I've resorted under a sleep specialist to some sleep, pharmacology every so often to try to relax me, because I know how important it is to get sleep and how dangerous it is to be without it for days, weeks, months. I mean, your immune system alone gets knocked about. So, I don't know if additives pharmacologically is a good thing or not. Certainly should be under the care of a physician, but it helped me along at certain times.
Mm-hmm. What did you notice? I'm kind of curious, just to use your example. What do you notice happen when you have trouble sleeping?
So I guess symptomology wise or symptom wise, I've just become more anxious and I'm not focusing in as well on what's important. My mind's just flying all over. I think probably when it got worse, I, maybe got sick more often, related to the immune system. Probably my relationship with family members or friends was hampered or deteriorated to a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I had a lot of problems, so I could go on and on, but hopefully I'm not alone.
You're not alone. You're not alone. And you just said something really key, and that's the mind, right? The mind is, I don't know if we have time, but I have a great analogy. How many minutes do I have here?
You have time, about 10 minutes.
Okay, good. I always like to, because I work in cognitive behavioral coaching as well, I always like to say that the thoughts, the emotions, and the actions all need to be in balance at all times. If the thoughts are getting too much of our time and space, other things are going to be compromised, including our actions. So I have this wonderful analogy of going on a road trip. What we really want is our aligned self, our true self, those values that I talk about checking in with. We want that part of you behind the wheel on the adventure of life, because life is an adventure. We do not know what tomorrow is going to happen. And there's different perspectives to look at it. That's how I choose to look at it. Next, in our passenger seat, we should have emotions, because emotions, remember, are a good friend. They have messages for us. They're trying to tell us something. Remember, stress is telling us there's a better way. So we want to listen to our emotions. We want to honor them. We want to allow for them. Here's the thing about the mind. As much as I'd love to kick it out of the car sometimes, believe me, the mind is, when it is triggered by ambiguity or change or something it doesn't know, what it does is, remember I talked about those two planets, the past and the future, it will go into super drive on a super highway up there between the past and the future, past and the future, past and the future, because what it's trying to do, and that's anxiety, basically, it's trying to control the ride. It's trying to avoid suffering. It doesn't want you to suffer. So it has a role, and that's kind role. It's trying to protect you. The problem with that is that it's seeing everything under a limitation. It's seeing it through this narrow window of how things can turn out. I want you guys to put your hand up to your eye. And I know this is a silly exercise, but just kind of close your eye for a second. There you go. So that's kind of how the mind sees things when you're in anxiety, okay? Now take your hand away. That's the possibility of things that could happen. It's endless possibilities. There's so many different ways it can work out. And the mind is just simply forgetting that. So we put the mind in the back seat on our adventure, okay? And the mind will try and be a backseat driver. As you're driving along, it'll try and tell you about the pothole that might come up, and that if we hit the pothole, we might get a flat tire. And if we get a flat tire, we might not be able to get help. And if we can't get help, and maybe we won't get food. And if we don't get food, we'll starve and we'll die to death. I mean, that's the mind when it's just on that rampage. It goes straight to the worst case scenario. And so we have to continually monitor the mind. That's what that mindfulness is about. It's really kind of like stepping away. What is the mind doing? What is it trying to control? What are these negative beliefs? What are the limitations it's setting up for me? And we have to kind of step back. And we have to get back, again, part of being in the driver's seat is learning also to turn up the radio. Like if you're on a road trip, you turn up the music and the emotions are going to go right along with that. They're going to start to feel good. You're going to start to feel good. And eventually the mind is going to be like, I'm talking, but nobody's listening. Nobody cares. And it will start to quiet down. And mindfulness also is saying, oh, look at that mountain. Look at that tree. Look at that cool thing up there. The more you start to feel good, the mind will quiet down. So when we're not feeling good, it's kind of this simple. When we're not feeling good, our job is to get back to feeling good. Our job is to come home to ourselves. Now, for some people, that's not simple because they've been on this rampage for a long time. Sometimes they can't remember it, but they might remember when they're holding a little baby, or they're in the embrace of their love after a long day of work. They remember the good feeling. But really, we're supposed to feel that way all the time, believe it or not. That's our right. We can feel okay. And we forget that. We think that this human struggle is just supposed to be endless stress. It's not. That's why I say it's our responsibility how we respond to all this. And if we make self-care a priority, then we're going to feel better. And that's why I'm promoting it.
And how do you avoid, we're living in a media stressful world. Yes. I would say the media is probably the one thing that stresses us out more than anything. And I try to avoid it now. I looked at a documentary on social dilemma. It was a great documentary.
Great documentary, yes.
And it changed my whole mindset of what to talk about around people and what to take in from the media. So, I work with a lot of these guys. I was so proud of the people who stood up and the tech world is this very tight clique, and they just put their reputations right out there and said, we've got to make mandates because this is unhealthy. The suicide rates of teenagers, for example, it's not proving to be a good thing in some regards. So we do need to take breaks from it. I really do recommend, my partner is really big into the news. He loves the news. He grew up in a political household. He loves watching it. I tell him that's fine, but I don't, I sift through, and I have specific times for when I'm going to watch any media. I think the more we can listen to our own self, like if we're in a good place, I think we can handle it more. But if we're not feeling good, it just feeds all of that anxiety. It feeds that mind that's just like, everything's bad, everything's bad, everything's going to fall apart, it's going to be bad, it's going to be bad. And then you're listening to it and you're getting confirmation. Well, what do you think is going to happen? It's just increasing your stress and anxiety. If you come home to center, you feel good, you've had a nice, and then you just kind of want to find out what's happening in the world, of course. But the more centered and grounded you are, the more you're going to be able to sift through what's important to your experience, what's important and what matters and what does feel right to you. And what can't, again, going back to the acceptance, what can you control and what can you not? Because a lot of times media is just like throwing in your face a bunch of stuff you can't control.
And that, again, increases that anxiety. I mean, it all kind of, it just keeps intertwining all of these sort of ideas and principles that we as coaches are really stressing.
Candace, do you have an app that you would suggest if people had that 10 minutes out of their time just to have some free time that's relaxing? We've had some people ask on the chat line if you have an app that you use or one that you would recommend.
Sure. Yeah. Calm is really great. It works for some people. It doesn't. I also tell people, whatever your particular stressors are, YouTube is fantastic. And I know there's a lot of people on YouTube right now. So YouTube is fantastic for finding little 10-minute meditations as well. And most people can get YouTube on their phone. That's where I find my stuff. So if I'm needing calm, if I'm needing to, I'm feeling a little bit of anxiety, there's really great meditational music I'll sort of put on in the background. There are meditations specifically if you're feeling pressure or needing to sort of come home emotionally. There's a lot of information there, but I would say calm is a really great one if you want to do it at night before you go to sleep. A lot of people are finding their strength and their sleep improving. We also at Lyra have been working with an app called My Strength, which is really fantastic as well. It sort of has these programs of self-care and self-help programs, and there's even one on sleep. So it's called My Strength. That's another really good one to look at.
I think people have mentioned a couple times. I'm sorry, Susan, go ahead.
No, you mentioned not to use any media or anything, or answer your phone or work on anything 30 minutes before you go to bed. I think that's so hard for us to do. And I'm always being reminded of that. Turn that off. But it seems like there's always just one more email that you need to answer, one more text message that you need to answer. So I'm very negligent in that. So I got to keep reminding myself that too, but you just got to finish one more important thing that you need to do. So it's very, very tough, but I feel like I can take care of myself better if with the work-life ratio, if I eat properly, get enough sleep and exercise. Just, you have to find time to exercise. It doesn't mean you have to go to the gym or anything, but just get out and walk, or, play tennis, or find somebody, a buddy system to work out with, or whatever that you can do, bike ride or whatever, and yoga. I love that too, just a kind of calming, and not only for stretching and everything too, but it's very mind setting too. But one of our people too, Jody had mentioned here, she's been in the COVID ICU nonstop for at least a year now. And a lot of our co-workers have been doing this and seeing a lot of her patients die while caring for the ECMO patients. These people get really close to the family and to these patients too. And that's really been taking a toll on them and on their mental health in the last year. So, but I think these apps too, they would really be helpful for them.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Susan. It's so true. I have a dear friend that works in the ICU during COVID at Mount Sinai, the COVID unit. So my heart just goes out, and like, you remembering that great quote, it's impossible to not be affected. It's absolutely impossible. So we really do have to take good care of ourselves. I also wanted to make a point about what you said. I think, what I was trying to say in the beginning of my speech, I was trying to rush it through, but I make a point of my work schedule, including my self-care. This is something that's huge for people. Schedule it in. Like, I think a lot of people say, well, that's my personal life and this is work. And they tend to put off their personal, like things like yoga. But if you make that part of your work day, that's been super, super effective for a lot of, especially my techies that work like 12-hour days, right? They'll just keep working. And it's so much better for you to really just make that, if you have the mandatory fight, like, to go back to what me and Ty were talking about, if these work companies are making it mandatory, they would do it. So you should do the same for yourself. It's helpful to do so. Also just a boundary, right? Of like, it's 30 minutes before I go to bed, I'm going to turn that off. And that's it, because there will always be another. And that's what I always tell clients, there will always be another email. you have to set the boundary.
I mean, I'm in such a better mindset during the day because I get up routinely. I swim a mile in the mornings routinely. And it's so relaxing because, you're in that zone and you're in that water, and it's really kind of, you kind of block everything out. Even though your mind is still thinking during that period of time, you just kind of get in that zone. It really is relaxing.
Yeah.
If I don't do it, if I miss it, it kind of stresses me out because now I'm missing it for the next 4 days because of this meeting. But it's I know I'm going to get back to it as soon as it's over.
So Ty, basically you're confirming that it makes a difference, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And when you skip it, you start to notice a shift. And so that's why it just has, especially in what we do. That's why I say I scheduled that beach time. The water is water is very symbolic for our emotional world. So water is a great thing to be around. Take a bath, take a nice hot shower, go sit by a body of water. It's a great way to feel invigorated and to fill our own cup. Nature is really important. Very, very.
Yeah. I'm wondering how watertight my laptop is. So during this meeting, the rest of me could get in the bathtub. I'm not sure if that's okay or not, but think about it. Anyway, hey, Candace, a couple people asked about a book, like self-help books, if you had any recommendation. And that's hard to do because there's so many self-help books out there. If you have a recommendation of something to read, even like, I don't know, on ego, Eckhart, but also I know Lyra actually helps out organizations or corporations. I mean, you have Starbucks and I don't know, IBM and whatever that actually send their employees set up times with you. I know that knowing you personally, but you also have your own company. So for people that wanted to maybe, privately get a hold of you, how would they do that?
Yeah, sure. I did have that on my original thing. I think that I will go ahead and get that information to Susan, maybe with the quality of life test and the things to look for in burnout, compassion fatigue, and secondary trauma. I'm going to send maybe a little informational packet along. I did have that at the end of my presentation, but I wanted to see your faces. So I will go ahead and have that. So if you could just look out for that, that would be great.
If I can announce it, it's the Soulful Journey Coaching.com. Is that correct?
Yes, the soulfuljourneycoaching.com. I'm Candace Mcadams, so you can also look up my name and see me there too.
And we'll place that on the chat window too, Candace.
Yeah, let me put that there, actually. Let me go ahead and put the website and my contact information, just so you have that.
So I think we're probably about done, right? We have 2 minutes or we're done, right? Time-wise, everybody, since we had a different time zone. There's Dr. Yeah, who's that? That's Dr. Lynn. So Candace, thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
I know you don't see all the Q&A, but there's so many people that you've touched. The list just goes on and on and on about thank you. And what it does is it reminds us, even though we may have heard this before in some fashions, it reminds us to get back to ourselves.
Yeah.
And that right there for me is always a blessing. So thank you again for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I love that you just said that. If there's one person in this room that is inspired to come home to themselves, I've done something well here in this hour. So I really appreciate you spending time with me. And I really wish you a lot of luck on the rest of it. And just remember to take those mindful moments. You could start practicing this week when you get your little breaks. Just take a moment to come home to self. Okay. I wish you a lot of luck on the journey, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Candace.
Bye.